Trans-Saharan trade routes. The largest desert in the world, the Sahara, is 3.5 million square miles of sand, rock, mountains, and plateaus stretching from the Nile River to the Atlantic Ocean. From 1200 to 1450, an extensive trans-Saharan trading system reached its peak. Like merchants at sea, caravans in the Sahara also faced storms and wrecks when desert winds forced them to abandon their wares or risk being stranded. Any successful caravan required experienced guides, and the best mariners in this dry sea were Berbers. Some Berbers were pastoralists who lived on the edges of the desert. Like pastoralists in Eurasia, the Berbers were essential to the growth of the trans-Saharan trade. The camel. Camels are superior to horses for desert travel. Their wide toes are more suited to the terrain, and they can travel up to 10 days without water. A single camel crossing the Sahara could carry around 400 pounds of trade goods. A land of gold, the Mali and Songhai empires. Many goods traveled along these trade networks, but the gold of West Africa and salt of the Sahara drove the trade. Salt, which is necessary for human life, was in short supply in West Africa. Berber tribes controlled several salt mines, which allowed them to buy high-value goods like gold from merchants in West African cities like Jen and Timbuktu. They could also purchase enslaved people in these cities. The trans-Saharan routes reached their peak from the 12th to 15th centuries, when a series of strong states in West and North Africa cooperated with the Berber tribes and asserted control over the trade. The region of West Africa south of the Sahara was home to some of the continent's most powerful empires and largest cities. Here, along the flood plains of the Niger River, agricultural societies like Mali and Songhai empires thrived on sorghum, millet, and rice. To the north of the Sahara, powerful Islamic empires and Muslim merchants united a vast swath of Afro-Eurasia from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean in a single trading system. As West Africans converted to Islam, this system expanded into the trans-Saharan trade. Arab merchants made their way across the desert to trade salt, cloth, and other manufactured goods in exchange for gold in West Africa. West Africans also traveled north. A great many of these, as many as 9.3 million between 800 and 1800, were enslaved. But plenty of West Africans made the journey voluntarily, many traveling on pilgrimage to Mecca. Caravans and merchants carried abundant wealth, goods, and people across the Sahara. After the Arab conquests of the 7th century, the Berbers converted to Islam. As trade expanded, many West African merchants converted as well. Islam provided a common language and value system, making communication easier. Written Arabic improved record-keeping in West Africa. Arabic legal codes and written contracts increased trust between merchants. In West Africa, Islam became the religion of urban elites. Since Islam spread by trade, it spread first to cities and the wealthy.
Most converts lived in market cities and were merchants or members of the ruling class. But most of the population was not urban. So local religions remained more important long after the arrival of Islam. The combination of increased trade, cross-cultural exchange, and Islam ushered in a golden age for the empires of West Africa. Cities grew and flourished as centers of trade and learning. Timbuktu became a center of Islamic scholarship. The trade allowed travelers and scholars to move around the world, exchanging knowledge. Ibn Battuta, the famous Moroccan scholar who traveled from Morocco to China, also visited Mali and was impressed by its wealth and social structures. Mansa Musa, the ruler of Mali himself, made the Hajj to Mecca in the 1320s. He traveled with tens of thousands of camels and servants, carrying a fortune in gold. He spent so lavishly that he destabilized the Egyptian economy. His displays of wealth helped create myths that West Africa was a land where gold grew like plants in the ground. Europeans began exploring the West African coast partly due to such myths. During the 15th century, Portuguese sailors moved further south, seeking a route around Africa to the Indian Ocean trade. They established new sea lanes bypassing the Saharan routes. making them less important to the global economy. But large caravans continued to cross the desert right up until the early 20th century, when the first railroads and steamships reached the interior of West Africa. Questions. What was the ship of the desert, and what made it so important to the Trans-Saharan trade? Why were pastoralists important to the Trans-Saharan trade? The author argues that these trade routes reached their peak from the 12th to 15th centuries. What changes caused this? Why did the rulers of West African kingdoms regulate the movement of merchants through their territory? The author argues that, though Islam arrived in West Africa before this period, local religions remained important long after its arrival. Why was this?